Ladies and gentlemen, it's finally here. Merry Football Eve. Joe, we in a mere 23 hours, we get to watch not only backups but starters from our favorite educational universities slam into each other at high speed for the first time in 212 days. And I could not be more excited that football is finally here. Joe, how you feeling, man?
I am so excited. I can't wait. It's going to be tough to sleep tonight.
Dude, okay, it's funny that you say that. I had a little bit of a hard time sleeping last night, and this may sound really stupid, but to us, this really is Christmas morning. This is as good as it possibly gets. If you've ever seen Elf, when he's answering the phone, he's like, "Hi, I'm Buddy the Elf. What's your favorite color?" That's all I'm gonna be tomorrow. Everybody's gonna ask me questions.
Yeah, I'm not doing any work tomorrow.
Yeah, everybody's going to ask me questions, and I'm just going to be like, "Oh, hi, this is Michael. It's football day. What can I do for you?" Like, I'm just going to be so unbelievably excited. So I'm super happy that football is here. Just couldn't be more excited. We got some great quality content lined up for you guys. This is the first week we're going to talk about DFS. Prices are out for this week. If you haven't seen them, get on one of the sites, DraftKings, FanDuel, Draft.com. They have a bunch of different platforms that you can play on. We'll be active in the DFS community this year, so if you guys want to play against us, we'll post some links to play against us later in the season. But we are just so excited. We're going to go over Week 1 matchups. If you guys have any questions about your Week 1 matchups, who to start, who to sit, let us know. We'll be sure to go through those if you have any questions. Before we get into all the high quality fantasy talk, I just want to remind everybody, hurricanes are still really rough out there. We've done a really great job raising a lot of money for the relief effort in Houston. Don't forget to go to CharityOrganizer.org, and that will help you pick good charities to give your money to, whether it be this one or the upcoming one that's about to slam into Florida. We want to take care of those guys. Anything helps, even if you just send them some water or something like that. It's very, very helpful. So anything that you can do, please go ahead and do that. I'm going to delay rolling out our Patreon page again. It's ready and everything to go, but I want to go ahead and I would rather give all those efforts to those people because they really, really need the help. But without further ado, let's get into some fantasy talk. Joe, this is the first week that DFS has been available to us. Well, you can play in the preseason, but we don't really ever play during the preseason. So this is the first regular season for the DFS slate. We have a full almost 16 games. We got one postponed due to hurricane. So we have 15 games this week. There's a lot of goodies to pick through. There's a lot of sloppiness to pick through as well. So parsing these has been, it's taken some time. I would say this is one of the longer sessions that I've spent on the initial DFS, just picking and choosing, highlighting and scratching off than usual. So there's not a ton of great games that I would really like to target this week. What do you think of the first slate? Other than being super excited, what do you think of the first just slate of NFL games? What was going through your mind when you were looking at these games?
Well, the first thing I always think of when I think of Week 1 in fantasy football is it is going to be a little sloppy.
Yeah.
I mean, all the starters have been off for at least 2 weeks. Some of them have been off longer if they're especially the starting running backs. And this is the first time going through a real game plan in 212 days or longer for most of them. This is the first time they're going to be really hitting people for 4 quarters. So you're going to expect a little bit of sloppiness, and there's going to be some weird things that happen. Just people who aren't good are going to go off. People who are good are going to have rough days. There's going to be some weird stuff. So just prepare yourself for that. The other thing I kind of noticed looking at the schedule is that there's not a lot of games with bad defense versus bad defense this week.
Yeah, right.
And those are the games you like to target in fantasy. Absolutely. And there just don't seem to be a whole lot of them this week. So from that perspective, it's also going to be a bit of a challenge to try to understand and figure out which players to play in DFS. But we've done all the legwork for you, so we'll give you our thoughts on that coming up.
No doubt, no doubt. So the first thing that we want to go over, that we want to attack, is very important. It's actually where you start your DFS adventure yourself. So picking your entries that you actually want to get into once you sign up and everything, and you get your money deposited and you're ready to go, you're all jacked up, you're ready to do your first lineup, and then there's this mountain of things to pick through depending on what you actually want to play, right? So there's I would consider three different main types of games, and we'll go over more about how you craft teams for those specifically. But I would say the three main different types of games that you're going to play are cash games, and those are usually double ups, 50-50s, which are you get in, and all you have to do is really be top half, really, and you should finish somewhere in the money, right? Those are those types of games. There's head to heads, which means that you play against someone else specifically, and it's usually just dollar for dollar, your lineup versus their lineup. It's like a regular it's like a regular season long league, but you don't have any commitment to a season long team. And then the third type, and this is where some people get confused because there's a lot of information going out about these, and there's a lot of varying types of these. It's tournament play or guaranteed prize pools. They're called both, right? And so tournament play is usually where you hear about the $1 million lineup, or you hear about the big money plays where you get the perfect lineup and you beat everybody and you win some absurd amount of money. Usually those pay out in the top 10%, 20%, somewhere right around there. If you finish in the top, if there's 1,000 people and you finish in the top 50 or the top 100, somewhere right around there, you'll get you'll win gratuitously more money than you entered the tournament with. Okay, so those are obviously harder. There's much higher threshold to actually cash in on those, whereas in cash games and head-to-head, you really do need to be just about 50%, 51% or better, and you should be able to cash in on those games. So those are the different types of games that you're going to want to that you're going to see when you're playing through the through the sites. Now, I want to give a note to all the people that have been playing DFS for maybe a year or two, a couple of years, and they're trying to increase their bankroll over time. This is very important. $1 and $2 entries are where people get in and spam lineups. It is very common. Sharks get in there and they put the same or very similar lineups all over. They spam as many entries as they possibly can. And this brings the threshold to actually cash, the score threshold, right? It brings it up, okay? And the threshold for $5 and $10 and even $25 games are much lower, like an entire touchdown lower. So you have to score 6 points or so less when you get into those lineups. So if you're trying to increase over a large amount of time, I would recommend you play a few less games and go with a lineup that you really trust and play lineups that are $5 and $10 rather than $1 or $2. I'm not trying to tell you to spend more money. If you want to play for $1 and $2, it's perfectly fine. That's all you can afford. No big deal. I would recommend that you play less until you get some bankroll, and then you can start to play more. But it's very important that you pick the entries that are more than $2, really is where the threshold starts to become a little bit more in your favor. Additionally, the difference between single entry and multi-entry meaning that you can add as many lineups as you want, usually up to a certain amount. Multi-entry threshold to score is usually much higher because people will get in and spam the same lineup over and over, and those people are very good, and they raise the threshold to cash by a decent margin. It's usually somewhere in between 2 and 4 points. It doesn't seem like a lot, but when you add in 2 and 4 points and a touchdown, like, these are big point values, and I can't tell you how many times I've come in and I was like 1.2 points away from being in the money. And if I had just picked maybe a different game, I would have been in the money with that same exact lineup. So be smart about what you pick. And that's for cash games and for tournament lineups. That's true for both of those. So you want to make sure that you're picking the right lineups. Now, look, once again, if you're just playing for fun or whatever, and you don't really care about winning over a long period of time, don't worry about it. Play whatever you want. Play what you think is the most exciting. Pick people that you want to root for. Pick people that are on your team or that are exciting. You can make emotional decisions. Just understand that that's probably not the best thing over a long period of time for you, which is what we're trying to do for you guys. We're trying to help you over the long term, pick the optimal thing for you over the long period of time. So, do you have anything to add to that, Joe?
Yeah, I was just going to add the one thing, at least we can tell you our strategy of how we try to make money over a long period of time, which is the way that you make the big money is in the tournaments, right? If you're going to, nobody's getting rich off of, or it's hard to get rich off of 50-50s or head-to-heads. It just takes a long time to build up money that way. But at the same time, you're very unlikely to win tournaments, so you're more likely to lose your money faster, even though that's how you make money in the long run is with the tournaments.
Right.
So what we do and what we might recommend, depending on how you're bankrolling yourself, is we try to build up our money on the head-to-heads and the cash games where you're more likely to win, but you build it up slowly. And then once we're playing with house money, so to speak, then we start entering in tournaments where we're going to be more likely to win big money, but also more likely to lose all of our money.
Right.
And so that way we'll kind of try to stay near what we started with and use house money to play in the tournaments.
Right. Yeah. Those are absolutely great points. The tournaments are where you're going to win your big money, but it is much harder to get started in those, so to speak. So, yeah, you want to build that bankroll, and then you want to try and take some shots at the big money. But it's all a lot of fun. So we're going to talk about the difference between cash games versus GPPs or tournament play, whichever you want to call it, and how we kind of construct our lineups for that, what the ideology behind that is, and then we're also going to go into some. I think we put together a couple of example lineups. We haven't really crafted ours. We usually do it a little bit closer to the weekend, so we haven't put the final touches on our roster. But I mean, all of the prices and stuff have been out for a couple of days now, so we've been kind of going through and making some notes and stuff like that. And we're going to tell you how we kind of go about what we do, and funny how we think alike sometimes, what we differ on, and those kind of things, and what ultimately we come out with. So for cash games, when you only need to be just a little bit better than the rest of the field, right? When you only need to be the 51%, 55%, maybe even 60% at the highest, even if you're playing triple ups, it's no greater than the top third or the top. It's a little bit less than that. You're looking for people who are going to be really good volume guys. You're looking for people who have high floors and not necessarily low ceilings. You don't want to cap yourself, but you're really looking for the guys that are the highest possible floor. You don't just want to get a bagel in a cash game, right? You can't afford to get a bagel in a cash game and expect to win over a long period of time. So you need to be very wary about injuries in the cash game and stuff like that. That's where DraftKings, they allow you to do a late player swap. That's pretty useful. So that's always something to consider. But you're looking for high floor guys. So in cash games, your big money running backs are usually really, really great. They're usually ones who you're looking to build your roster around in some form or fashion. High target guys are really great. Like Mike Evans was cash game money last year because he was like 10 targets a game or more. So that was really, really awesome. Those are the kind of guys that you're trying to build your roster around. Whereas GPPs and tournament plays, you're looking for flyers and people that will really, really return major amounts over your investment for them, right? So you're looking for the $3,000 guy that'll score you 20 points, right? Because he's the guy that's going to go off and score 2-3 touchdowns that week. That's hard to do, right? That's what everybody's looking for in fantasy every single week. And if you could predict that week after week, one, you'd be a millionaire, and two, you would win every fantasy league you've ever touched because there's always that guy on the waiver wire who's going to boom for that week, right? So, Joe, tell me, when you're going through, let's start with cash games specifically. You're going through the cash games, you're looking at these prices, you're looking at these games coming up. How do you usually go through it? What's your methodology to pick, hey, I like this guy, hey, I don't like this guy? What are you starting with, and how do you go about it?
The two main things I look for are matchups, who they're going against. So and of course I have to know who their quarterback is, what their situation is, but I go in knowing that every week, right? Right. That part doesn't change.
Yep.
But the main thing to look at is who else on their team is injured. Is that going to help them or hurt them? What's the matchup that they're playing against, and how's the game going to go?
Right.
So, for example, if it's a wide receiver and they're playing against a bad defense, but it's the Patriots and it's Brandon Cooks playing against a bad defense, and the Patriots are favored by 2 touchdowns. I still don't really want Brandon Cooks. Mm-hmm. Because unless he gets one of the first 2 touchdowns, then they're probably just going to run the ball the rest of the game.
Right.
So not only do you want to say, like, oh, they're playing the worst defense, but is the game going to be competitive? This is why we were talking about earlier. You want to be in these games where you have 2 bad defenses and the scores for both teams are going to be high.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was almost about to tell you earlier. It was super upsetting in some way where, like, I looked at the slate of games, and it's funny. I compartmentalize this, right? Because, like, I take DFS and it's like its own monster. I knew all of the games this week already. I'm so excited. I better know all the games this week, right? I knew all the games in the back of my mind, but I hadn't thought through them from a DFS perspective yet. And so when I was looking at all of them, I was like, man, there's not that game that just like speaks to my soul that says, oh yeah, 2 great offenses and 2 dog crap defenses, right? Like that's the game that I want. I want that like that New Orleans New York game from a couple of years ago where it was like both just crap. Both defenses just decided to stay at home, and like both quarterbacks threw for 400 plus yards, like almost 500 yards. And there was just like 100 points. That's the game that I want every single week for DFS, right? I want the Steelers and the Patriots to just like show up and not play defense and just throw the ball 100 times. Like that's what I want. I just want a slugfest. And there really was arguably 1, like 2 games maybe that you could make a decent debate for, and there was just none of those were that game where it was just like, yes, it just like glows on the screen where it's like, this is the game that I want to pull away from. So this one was a little bit tough, definitely. I have to agree with you. So that's the way that you start going through. I'll tell you what I do. Usually, if I'm going through the beginning, I'm looking at the lineups and stuff like that. The first thing that I'm looking for cash games is who can return me 2x value. Like that's a baseline for me. And what I mean by 2x value is I mean, if you look at their salary and let's say it's $6,000, who can get me 12 points, right? 2 times their salary value. And if all of my players can get me 2 times value, I feel very comfortable going forward with them in a cash game, because that means I'm basically getting double what the salary believes that they're worth, right? And so if they can go in and get me 2 times value, most people will be in that, most lineups will be in that 150 to 170 range, probably somewhere right around there. And if you can go in, if you can get anything above, 130 or so, you should be really, really looking to be solid in the money. So, I usually go through with a comb looking for 2 to 3 times value in my cash games. Is there anything specific in cash games specifically that you do differently that are maybe like head to head versus when you do like 50-50s and double ups and that sort of thing? Are you looking for anything different?
Yeah, so the one thing that I really like to do in cash games, well, the 2 things really is, one of them I don't double up as much, and by double up I mean get a quarterback and their receiver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you won't like load up on one team or anything like that.
Yeah, right. That's right. Whereas in tournament play, I'm more likely to do that because it actually increases the odds of that going off, right? Because
you have to,
like if Brandon Cooks has 3 touchdowns, that means Tom Brady had 3 touchdowns.
Right.
Right. So if I double up on those guys, then it actually makes it easier for me to have big weeks.
Absolutely.
Whereas in the cash games, I don't necessarily need to have huge weeks. I don't get a reward for them going off. I get paid the same whether I get first place or whether I get first place, last place that gets in the money.
Right.
So I don't get any reward for scoring huge point totals. I just need to do better than average.
Right.
And so in that case, I'm more willing to diversify a bit.
Right.
Or I feel the need to diversify a little bit more to make sure you don't get a bad game.
Right.
And at the same, so for that reason also, I tend to think a little bit more highly of running backs in the cash games. Running backs tend to be more consistent. When wide receivers go big, they go big. Right. Like Julio Jones had 300 yards in one game last year. No running backs have done that ever, probably. So, when wide receivers go big, they go really big. So in the tournament games, I'm more willing to go with that. But Julio Jones also had 2 games where he had like 1 or 2 or 0 fantasy points last year.
Right.
And the top running backs never do that either.
Right. So
in cash games, I'm more interested in spending the big money on the top running backs. Whereas in the tournament games, I'm going to be looking more at spending the big money on the big receivers.
Yeah, guaranteed. I'm much more willing to double or even triple down on a quarterback and their duo or trio, right? Not a trio of wide receivers, but I may go, quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, maybe, or very rarely will I go quarterback, running back, and top wide receiver. You can get away with that with people like the Steelers at home sometimes because they're all just so good. And you could get away with that last year with like Matt Ryan, Julio, and their like Devontae Freeman, or even Tevin Coleman if you thought that you could get a discount and make that all work together. Because, you know, Shanahan's really, really good at pulling all those guys together. You could probably even get away with that maybe one time in tournament play this year with Gase, because you could get Smoke and Jay, Devontae, and either Julius Thomas, who will be the other touchdown recipient, or Jay Ajayi if you feel like you need some, if he's priced appropriately. So those are the kind of people that you could potentially put together for tournament play. But I'm 100% with you. For cash games, you have to look for volume, like a good floor of volume and diversification. You don't really want to stack up on one team. If you do, it's not the end of the world, but you need to worry about hedging your bets a little bit better. And like you said, that's a great point that you brought up. You don't need to be first. It doesn't matter first or last place that cash is in a cash game, right? You just want to be in the money, and that's what gets you paid. So when I go through cash games, I'm definitely looking at high volume. You know, you can never really predict injury, but I'm less likely to take people who are in injury risk. I just don't want to bagel in cash games. I want to do anything that I can to not get zero in cash games. And that's usually what leads to a pretty good recipe for success. So, conversely, we sort of covered this already. Tell me, is there anything else that you're very likely to do in tournament play that you, because I can tell you in tournament play, I look for guys that are, I always look for guys that I think are like, oh, you can't hear me? Hang tight. Can you hear me now?
Yep, back.
All right, cool. We were having some connectivity issues there for a second. I think it's my internet, actually. I'm not sure. But anyway, in tournament play, I'm looking for the guy, like I'm looking for one guy that's minimum value that I think should not be minimum value, or very close to that minimum value that I think can return me 5x probably. I'm looking for somewhere in between. You know, I'm looking for no less than 3x, and I'm looking for at least 5x. And if that person can return somewhere in the line of 7 to 8 times value, like that's just insane, right? The $3,000 guy that goes for 20 points or whatever, like that guy's just money in the game if I can try and predict who it's going to be. So, do you do anything specifically for tournament games that you think is like different maybe?
Yeah, so the main thing that I'm gonna do more in tournament play and is really just go after guys like John Brown, these receivers who go deep and run fast, Ted Ginn, because they're gonna be cheap, and that's all it takes is one busted coverage or one big play. You know, these are guys gonna be running the fly routes 10 or 15 times a game.
Right.
That's all it takes is one guy falling down, and then all of a sudden they've already got your 15 fantasy points, which is already 5 times what you paid for them.
Right.
So, you know, you know that when you get them, you might get zeros, but that's, you know, that's what you live with to get these cheap guys who allow you to stack up at the other positions. And then when they hit big, and you make a lot of money off them.
Right. And once again, if you can pair their quarterback up with that, you know, by all means, if you, I mean, they have to get the ball thrown to them, right? Like, so if you think that they're going to go off, you should be looking at least at their quarterback as a viable option. If he's really expensive, it's understood why you may not go with him. But if it fits the bill, you shouldn't be looking at this person and saying, oh, this person's going to go off, and then look at their quarterback and say, oh, I don't want that guy. Obviously, there's something that's not meeting up there. So you need to make sure that you're evaluating things properly. So if you don't feel good about that quarterback, you need to consider why you should be feeling good about that wide receiver. Not always the case, but it's something you at least need to pay attention to. So, all right, with that in the books, at least telling you guys how to go about playing your DFS games to make sure that nobody's walking into something completely dark, and they're doing the things, like I said, optimally over time to make sure that they try and build their bankroll. We're gonna go over. We're actually gonna do this is gonna be for week 1. I don't think we're gonna do this in the future, but just to make sure that we don't miss anything, we're gonna go through the games one by one, and we're just going to make sure that we cover everything. We're going to talk about a couple of things going through all of this. We're going to talk about any major injuries that are either people that are out or people that are now off of the injury list that were a concern before. We're also going to talk about season-long matchups, so make sure that you're listening for if who you should play for your season-long leagues as well. We'll tell you matchups that we sort of like and stuff like that. And then we'll tell you who we like on the DFS side. There's obviously going to be less DFS players because if everybody was a good play, like everybody would just be, all at the top scoring. Like it just doesn't work that way. So we're going to tell you who we think is going to be highly owned. We're going to tell you who we think is the contrarian play, which means that, if this person's owned 80%, we're not looking to get that person, right? We want to get away from them, especially in tournament play, because everybody else is going to have that person. So we're going to tell you who's chalky, who's the contrarian play, and then we're just going to tell you who we think may be good values and just who we like this week in general. So with the first game, we got to kick it off with the obviously first game of the season. It's Chiefs-Pats. Now, as far as injuries are concerned, obviously you should know that people that are out for the year, Edelman's gone. Travis Kelce, the tight end for the Chiefs, is off of the injury report at this point. So he practiced full today. His calf is fine. He's a full go. And we have like the 1-2 tight end matchup in the league this week, or tomorrow, actually, not this weekend. So Kelce being back is a really great thing for the Chiefs. He's going to be the top target share. I think that they're going to be creative with the way that they put the ball in the hands of other receivers. And then the Chiefs' run game will be the Chiefs' run game. Joe, tell me your overall thoughts about this game from a season-long perspective, and then tell me who you like in the DFS matchups.
Yeah, sure. So, I think that Belichick's going to do what Belichick's going to do, which is he's going to look at what the other offense does and say, what's the thing that they do best? They're not going to beat us doing that. The thing that the Chiefs do best is throw to Travis Kelce and do gimmick plays to Tyreek Hill, right?
Yep.
He's going to, and they have a rookie running back, and so Belichick's going to say basically, like, make that guy and make their scrubby receivers beat me. So I would be a little worried about Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Of course, in season-long league, if you have Travis Kelce, you're playing him because You'd be insane not to. But in DFS, I know it's a Thursday game, so they don't do too much DFS on that anyway. But if you are playing the Thursday DFS, I'd shy away from Travis Kelce just because I think that Belichick's going to really hone in on him and say, make anybody else beat us. On the Kareem Hunt is a surefire start in
season-long, yeah.
And season-long. DFS, I think, I don't love the Chiefs offense against the Thursday night game, so it's a little bit of a different story on DFS.
What do you think as far as the Patriots are concerned, DFS-wise? Who's the running back? If I held the gun to your head and said you have to own one, who's the guy?
I think I'd pick Mike Gillislee this week. I wouldn't – I try to avoid them in DFS if at all possible, but I think I'd pick Mike Gillislee this week. I think he's got the best chance of getting touchdowns. I don't think there will be a ton of touchdowns in this game, but I do think that he's going to be their first and second down back, and I think he's going to have the best chance of getting any of the short yardage touchdowns and stuff. So he'd be the guy that I'd want. I also just don't know who the receiving back's going to be. They have James White and Deion Lewis. Are they going to split time? Is one of them going to be the guy? I don't know. I don't really want to be a part of that. Yeah, at least Gilly has a defined role for me.
Right. I don't blame you for that at all. I mean, I think Gilly has like a potential stat line of like 40 to 60 yards and like anywhere from 1 to 2 touchdowns probably is somewhere right around there. I think that'll be his role. I can't imagine that he doesn't take over the goal line back duties. I don't want anything to do with them in DFS. I really just wanted to put you on the spot as for the top one, but I wouldn't own them in DFS anyway. The only person that I would really want to own from a DFS perspective on the Patriots is I would really only want to own Gronk this week is probably the person that I would really want to own. I don't have super faith. Like the Chiefs are a good defense, and their passing defense is good, especially if they play Marcus Peters and press. Like their defense is good. Gronk can beat anyone, so I don't worry about him at all. This is the exact type of game that on the opposite side, if I was actually trying to get away from what the crowd was doing, I would play Tyreek Hill in tournament play, right? Because he has the opportunity to, if one person misses, he's got 4.2 speed, he's gone, right? And he can also has the possibility to return touchdowns as well. I don't think that'll happen, but it always can. They have a good special teams unit. He may return. I think he's going to return I think he's going to return some balls in the special teams game now that it's regular season. And then I think that they're just going to try to get the ball to him creatively. I don't feel great about that. Like, it makes my stomach a little bit queasy, but you have to do things like that in tournament play that are different if you want to have any chance of winning the entire money. So that's the only person that I would even consider playing in a DFS perspective. Kareem Hunt, I could see if you wanted to fire him up, but I think what is he? I was trying to see right before I started. I thought he was kind of expensive, if I wasn't mistaken. I don't see his price on here right off, but if he's cheap, I could understand if you wanted to fire him up from that perspective, but I'm not like super onto him in DFS this week either. I think the Pats are going to be really prepared for this game, and I think they're going to make it really tough for the Chiefs. I don't think they're going to get blown out, but I do think that it's going to be a toughie I think it's going to be a tough road to hoe for the entire game, and they're going to have to be really, really creative with how they get plays. And so, I don't know, that doesn't really spell, great things to me. You're right. Kareem Hunt is a surefire start in season long. Travis Kelce is a surefire start in season long. I can understand if you need to start Tyreek Hill in a season long, go ahead, do it. If you need to, there's worse plays out there. But those are probably the only thing. And then obviously your Patriots in season long, you start those guys unless you have significantly better options. Chris Hogan is the only guy that I'd maybe be just a little bit iffy on. I'd fire up Gilly in a season long. I don't have any problems doing that. I wouldn't start any of the other 3 running backs unless you really had to. So, all right.
Yeah, so next game, Jets are playing at the Bills. This one might be a stinker from a viewing and aesthetic perspective, Yikes. But who you got for fantasy?
For fantasy, well, hold on. Let's start with an important point of news. Jordan Matthews with the chipped sternum is off of the injury report now. He's practicing fully. So that is a good note. I think somebody's got to catch passes there, and he is a good possession receiver. I don't think Tyrod is like too hot of garbage to not be able to get the ball to him in space. So, I'm definitely not playing him in DFS just because I don't trust. Or actually, I'll play LaShawn McCoy in DFS definitely because I think he's the best high volume running back. And he's $1,200 cheaper than Bell and DJ. And literally, Sean McDermott wants to run the dude every play. Like, he's gonna try and kill him before week 3. So I at least want in on that action. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I want to get on that action while I have the time, right? So he's $8,200 on DraftKings this week. PPR obviously adds value. They like to run the ball a lot. I don't think that they're going to change that, even though Anthony Lynn is gone. And there's just nobody else that's like inspiring on that team at all. Tournament play, you may be able to play Tyrod because of the rushing value, but that doesn't inspire confidence in me either. Jets, I literally want to play no one. Like, the Jets are just, I don't even think that they're going to be behind enough that they want to play Bilal Powell a lot. And I think Matt Forte is really going to start the season as the bell cow back, but he doesn't inspire me enough because their line is crap too. And they don't have any wide receivers to throw to. Like, I want no part of the Jets any way whatsoever. Even if I'm in season long, I'm considering putting those guys away unless I really need them to start for me. And I would really refrain from starting any of their wide receivers if you can help it in any way whatsoever. Obviously, you're firing up Shady, and if you have Tyrod and he's your only quarterback, you're firing those guys up at season long.
Well, what I'm hearing from you here is the big winner here is the Bills' defense and special teams. So
yeah,
we're not playing any Jets. That means you're starting the Bills' defense, right?
Right.
And we're not starting the Bills' defense because they're good. We're starting the Bills' defense because last year, the number 1 defense in fantasy was whoever played the Jets.
Yep.
If you played that defense every week, you had the best defense in fantasy. And the Bills are playing the Jets this week. Jets are probably worse on offense, or certainly not any better on offense this year than they were last year. They lost all of their receivers. Their offensive line got worse. Their running backs are the same, and their quarterback maybe got a little better, so maybe they're slightly better on offense.
Their running backs are a year older.
Yeah. I'd be stunned if by the end of the season the team who played the Jets isn't again in other words, the Jets aren't the worst fantasy offense again.
Right.
By the end of the season, I'd be stunned if that weren't the case. Bills are a great DST play this week.
Yeah, I think they're a very good DST play this week as well. I agree. All right, so the next game is Jags-Texans. Joe, the only thing that I'm going to mention about this game that I think is something that I usually don't go for is the narrative, right? I never buy into the narrative. I don't go for that kind of stuff. Some people do. That's fine if you want to buy into that. If that's something that you buy into, look for the Houston team to rally around, or the Texans to rally around their city and their team this week. This is a huge opener against a division opponent. There's some scrappy guys on both sides of the field that really, really enjoy playing in this matchup. It was a hyped up 2 games last year. They had some really great defensive matchups on both sides of the ball, and JJ Watt is back, and no matter how you slice it, like, that's a huge return for a Texans defense that was already super stout last year. The big injury note here is that Lamar Miller's the Texans are carrying 5 running backs. Okay, 5 running backs in their roster. Their 5th running back is Tyler Ervin, who's basically a receiver and a special teams player. Lamar Miller is the starter. That leaves 3 people in the middle. 2 of them are injured. The top 2 behind Lamar Miller are injured. There is no way that he doesn't get at least 20 touches of the football this week, and I am all about that volume. I think you're a little bit less high on him than I was, but I love Lamar Miller as a DFS play this week if you think he fits into your lineup somewhere. There's a couple of other people that are close to him in value that I think are decent, but there's a decent gap from about the $6,000 range to the $4,700 range that you can make a really good case that he's the best player in that entire grouping. And so pair that with somebody who's going to get 20 touches. Like, I love him as a cash game play this week. I'm probably not high on him as a tournament play. But I love him as a cash game play this week. What do you think? And what do you think about some of the other players there?
Oh, I think Lamar Miller he will get a lot of volume, so I can't fault you if you do play him. I think he's going to find it tough sledding. I think the Jags' defensive line improved again. And I don't see this Texans offense starting the season hot. I think that Bill O'Brien is a complex scheme. I think that while Savage has been in the system for a while, this is really his first chance to be a full-time starter. And so I think it'll take him a little while to get adjusted to that. And I think the Jags are going to say, make them throw and beat us, not going to let them run. So I'd shy away from Lamar Miller a little bit, but again, the volume, as Mike mentioned, is secure, and so there are worse things you can do than go with the guys who can get 20 touches. The rest of the people in that game, DeAndre Hopkins, of course, is the other big name. I'd shy away from him a little bit. I think that Jalen Ramsey's really good cornerback, and again, I'm not sold on Tom Savage. He'll be better than Brock was last year. Hopkins is playable in season-long leagues and should be rostered and things like that on the end of last year maybe. But I do think this first game I want to watch and see what happens over there. There are more sure things going around. On the Jags side, I don't really want any of them. You can play Fournette. He's healthy. His foot is better. He's off the injury list. But anybody else, really don't want to be involved in any of that. Texans' defensive line is too good. Their secondary is not bad, and Blake Bortles is most likely going to throw a lot of interceptions.
Here's my problem with Fournette. He's $5,700. And for $300 more, I can get Gurley, and for $400 less, I can get Kroll, who will get the same volume or more against worse run defenses, right?
And again, you want to keep in mind the game flow here. Texans are almost certainly heavily favored in this game. All it takes is 1 or 2 Bortles pick sixes, and they can't run the ball anymore.
Right.
So I don't feel great about any of the Jags offensive players this week.
Also, too, I know that Fournette was a high pick, and trust me, I by far think he's the best running back on the team. Please don't take this the wrong way. But they're also smart about their first-round investment, or they should be smart about their... Tom Coughlin is smart about his first-round investments. He's not just going to run Fournette into the floor if he doesn't see a way to win the ball game, right? So it's not impossible that... And he's a rookie. It's not impossible that 16, 17 touches into this game, they start handing off to Ivory and Yeldon a bit more. I don't think it's the best idea, but it's not impossible. I mean, they're not just going to sit there and not get any touches the entire year. It's just not possible. They won't do that. They have 3 running backs who are at least capable of running into the back of linemen and falling forward for 2 yards. So they're going to hand the ball off at least a couple of times to those guys. And then, as you stated about DeAndre Hopkins, Jalen Ramsey is an incredibly good corner. I wouldn't be surprised if he's somewhere in the top 5 this year. He's very, very, very good. And this is going to be a battle for both division games, and he's going to shadow DeAndre the entire time. So I want to see how that works out too, and I want to see how Tom Savage goes forward. So I'm okay with sitting back and watching this one work out. But I'm not opposed to Lamar Miller being the guy that I grab out of this game because of a really high volume share, the specific situation. But I think this is a game to actually key on, see how both of these offenses and defenses look. Like, this is a game that you need to use your eyes for, right? Box scores won't necessarily tell everything. You need to see how both sides are playing and who's actually winning the battles between wide receiver, who's winning the battle in the trenches, if quarterbacks are making good throws and stuff like that. This will be a very telling game for the rest of the season, whether these guys are going to be playable or not. So, yeah, I think that game's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, so speaking of interesting games, the next one I personally think is really interesting. We've got the Steelers at the Browns. So it's really interesting for a lot of reasons. One is that the Browns were a tire fire last year. You would basically start anybody who was playing against them on offense, and you almost wouldn't play anybody except for Terrell Pryor on the Browns. We both think it's going to be a little bit of a different story for the Browns this year. Additionally, the other interesting aspect of this is on the Steelers side, Le'Veon Bell is coming back after not playing with the team at all during the preseason.
Yeah.
And Ben Roethlisberger is playing on the road, which, as we all know, is a scary experience. So how do you feel about this game?
Oh, the game as a whole, not a thumbs down kind of game, but definitely Ben Roethlisberger is on the road as a thumbs down kind of guy, right? Like, you and I have talked about this, a viable strategy, like actually a really good strategy this year, is pick Big Ben in season long and play him on his home games and sit him on the road games and find somebody else. Somebody who, funnily enough, with like a set as big as Ben Roethlisberger that actually matches up well this year with him is Cutler. So you could get the Cutlassburger, right? And you could play Cutler on Ben's road games, and they actually have really great matchups the way that they work. So Ben is a top 5 guy at home, and he's just a crapshoot away. Like, he has good games, but it's less likely, and it's not even always against like crappy teams. Like, he fails on the road against crappy teams. He's done this against the Browns before when they were way worse of a dumpster fire than they are now. So I'm not firing up Ben at all. I'm not afraid. He's not so bad that I'm afraid of Antonio, because like, he can still throw 2 touchdowns to Antonio, hand off 2 touchdowns to Le'Veon Bell, and still throw 3 interceptions. Like, that's the kind of player that he is. It'll be a very interesting game to watch, to say the least. The Browns will definitely be better this year. The Steelers can be run on, so I'm not terribly afraid of playing. Actually, here's my thoughts. I'm being very honest here, and I'm just going to admit that I don't know. Either Duke Johnson or Isaiah Crowell will probably go off in this game. I just don't know which one. I can't decide if it's going to be the guy that gets behind the linebackers and catches a bunch of balls. That'll be DJ. And I can't decide if it's just going to be the guy that just lines up and gets 18 carries up the middle and just winds up burning them, because I mean, the Steelers are not very good on run defense, so they can be run on. So I don't know who it's going to be, but it's probably going to be one of those. I probably don't want to start anybody else. Kaiser would really, really have to show me something special, and it would probably be out of Corey Coleman. If you're trying to take like a major shot in the dark this week and you wanted to get Corey Coleman in a tournament play, I wouldn't fault you for that, because if they do anything on offense, it's probably going to come through that way. But other than that, the Steelers guys are pretty obvious. I don't know if I would start Bell this week because of
I think if you're paying up for running back, pay for David Johnson. We'll talk more about him later in the next game, actually. But Le'Veon Bell being out as long as he's been out, and with the Steelers heavily favored in this one, I suspect that they will lighten his load a little bit compared to what it will be the rest of the season, and compared to what David Johnson's will be this week. And David Johnson's actually cheaper in DFS this week, so it seems like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah. So, Joe, let me ask you this. This is an interesting question. I didn't even ask you this off stream. I'm curious as to your thought on this. So, they lighten the load for Bell a bit. They literally cut everyone besides James Conner. Do you think he's the guy that gets the backup load for what Bell doesn't carry in this game? Like, who's the guy that benefits most, right? Like, does because we know how flexible the Steelers offense is, right? Like, these carries that Bell would usually get, or little dump offs, they could go to Vance McDonald, right? They could go to another tight end. They could go to Martavis Bryant. I don't think that those will, but they could go to Eli Rogers. Like, they could go to any number of people. Who do you think is the most likely recipient of this, back haul of stuff that Le'Veon Bell is not going to get this week?
I just think that James Conner is going to get 5 to 10 carries. I think they want to get his feet wet. And I think they'll be. I think that they're hoping that they'll be somewhat meaningless carries. I think they're hoping to do it in the second half,
yeah.
And the Steelers are ahead. I think that. So Mike Tomlin's an old school guy. I think that if the Steelers are losing, Le'Veon Bell will play the whole game.
Yeah. I think he's got to. Yeah, I think he's got to.
But if the Steelers get up by 10 points or more, I suspect that they'll give him some more breathers. I'm going to be honest. I'm stunned that they cut Fitz Toussaint. I don't think he's very good, but I'm just, again, Mike Tomlin's kind of an old school guy. I'm just surprised that they got rid of him now, with only a rookie kind of behind him. So that was really surprising to me, especially with Le'Veon being out. But that's the way it goes, and I think that the only other guy that was getting any carries in the preseason is James Conner. I think. Again, I don't think he's playable at all by any means this week.
Right.
But I do think that he's going to get 5 to 10 carries.
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing to me too that they cut Fitz Toussaint and we didn't see like a D'Angelo Williams signing. Like, I thought that was inevitable once they cut Toussaint that we were going to see him come back. I know it was pretty inevitable that Bell was going to show up and he was going to play this year, but still, like, keeping only one guy and it being a rookie, you're right. Tomlin is just like almost too old school of a guy for that kind of move. So fire up all the Steelers as regular and season long. You can even fire up your Browns in season long. I wouldn't shy away from playing any of them in season long. Even Corey Coleman, if you wanted to. I don't know that I would be super excited about playing Kenny Britt this week. But everybody else is pretty much a good go. I wouldn't play Deshaun Kaiser.
So, yeah, I'm not crazy about firing up all the Steelers this week. I fire up Le'Veon and Antonio. Anybody else, I let them sit. Ben's playing on the road. I don't want to be a part of any of the secondary options there, and I don't want to be a part of Ben either unless I have to be.
Okay, so even if Ben is your season long, you'd rather go out and get some money on the wire and put him in there.
It depends who's available, right?
Right, of course.
If there's a good option, yeah. You don't have to drop somebody too good, then yeah. But I do suspect that this will probably be his best road game of the season.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty likely scenario. All right, let me ask you this: Flacco's coming back week 1, playing against the Bengals. Would you pick Flacco over road Ben at Cleveland?
No.
Okay, so I would say that's probably close to the line, though, right? Like, not much, not terribly above that.
If Flacco had been playing, then I would take him.
Okay, all right.
But the guy who like to chuck the ball long, he's got a bad back. That's his biggest strength is throwing it far, and if you can't throw it far, what are you gonna do?
Throw it to running backs. That's the answer. All right, so next game is Cardinals-Lions. No major injury news in this one, so to speak. This game feels to me like the most underhyped one of the week. I'm having a hard time from a DFS perspective trying to decide which Lion is most likely to probably do something special this week. But I mean, I know that sounds funny, but I really am. I try and go through each game and decide, is there anybody that's going to do anything special this week? And I was at a loss on the Lions. It just feels so evenly spread out that I didn't necessarily want a part of anyone. Now, that's good for an offense. That's as far as they're concerned. Jim Bob Cooter has done a very, very good job of spreading the ball around almost equally. It's almost scary how equal it is, right? How well they've spread the ball around. But for fantasy purposes, it's that sucks balls. I don't want anything to do with that. It's so bad for us. So Kenny Golladay is a big guy that has been added to this team. I don't think that it's crazy unreal to see some dumb production touchdown wise out of him this season on some ridiculously small number of touches. But I do want to warn people before I hand this over to you, be careful Kenny Golladay blowing up week 1. Don't buy into that. He's going to have a couple of 2 touchdown games because he's their best red zone option. Be careful buying into that and just pump the brakes, okay? Joe, what do you think about this game, and how soon is David Johnson going to die in this game?
Yeah, the Lions, I don't want a part of them this game. At Stafford, usually going to be a pretty good play. The Cardinals' defense is pretty good, though.
Yeah, they're
solid. The rest of the Lions, as you mentioned, they're hurt. by the fact that they spread it around so much.
Yeah.
And again, the Cardinals' defense is good, so I don't know that I want to be involved too much this week. On the Cardinals side, they play David Johnson, right? I mean, the Lions' defense isn't that great. They're going to give DJ the ball minimum of 25 times, probably more. Even when they're winning by a lot, they give him the ball, so you don't have to worry about a game flow issue.
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah, Bruce Arians is determined to make sure that DJ doesn't get a second contract.
Yeah.
Just he's going to injure him. But the other guy I want is Larry Fitzgerald. I think he's going to do work against the Lions. He's going to move all over, so people who are worried about Darius Slay covering him, he's not going to follow him over the place. Larry Fitzgerald lines up in line all the time, basically as a tight end. More or less, sometimes he's a good blocker. He gets off.
He's an excellent blocker. He's an excellent blocker.
That really allows him to get open on the play action stuff and get away from those guys. So I think that Larry's going to have a great week. If you're playing in a tournament, I don't think it's a terrible week to play John Brown. He is listed as like a fourth wide receiver.
I know, it's so hilarious.
But the thing with John Brown is that he's only going to run one route. It doesn't matter where he's listed. When they want a guy to run straight really fast, he's the guy. Right? He's running 9 routes. So he's your guy. So if you want to bet against or you want to bet that the Lions are going to blow a coverage, which is not terribly unlikely, John Brown's your guy in a tournament league. That's pretty much it. Carson Palmer's not a terrible replacement option if you have a terrible matchup this week, but I wouldn't go for him in DFS or anything like that.
I would be all over Larry in DFS this week. I think he's going to eat. He runs out of the slot more than anything else, and I think that's a strength of the Cardinals' Air Coryell system, as well as just Larry being good at it. You mentioned he's good at blocking, so that means he stays in on run plays. He's a very untelegraphed player. He's got great hands. And one of the things that the Lions are best at on defense, which is their defensive line, I mean, Ziggy Ansah is a really good player. The Cardinals have one of the premier lines in the league, so that neutralizes a large portion of what they're really good at. And so that allows Carson Palmer to hopefully not be terrible this game, because he was really bad some games last season. I worry about him this year. I don't know if he's going to be god-awful. I think he's going to improve, but I don't know by how much. But I think that neutralizes a lot of their pass rush, and that gives Palmer a good opportunity. And also with DJ, with how good he is, I think it really neutralizes how quickly they're able to get after Palmer, and that gives them good time to throw. I don't think it's a terrible week for John Brown, although I really just don't feel comfortable playing him really much. He's going to blow up a couple of weeks, but I can't tell you which weeks those are. We'll do some more film study and see if we can maybe come up with better trends for John Brown. But, you know, the Lions are pretty fast on defense, and that's why I would stray away from playing John Brown this week maybe. And I do think that Larry is going to get a humongous amount of, like, between DJ and Larry, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that they could touch the ball 40 times. So that's a large portion of the offense. They're not against using the tight end, even though they literally don't have anyone there that plays tight end. And then you got to give a couple of other touches to, you know, three touches to a backup running back, and then you need to give 4 or 5 balls to ancillary receivers. So I just don't think that leaves that much left over for John Brown, and I do think that they're going to be winning this game as well. So talking about game flow, I don't think they're going to be chucking it downfield. I think so. You know, with all those things being said, I think Larry is really your play this week. Obviously, play DJ. You should feel comfortable playing him in a cash game. If you think, you know, if you build the rest of your lineup and you think that you have $8+ left, I think it's great to fire up DJ. He's a super safe play. Obviously firing up in season-long leagues. But yeah, I'm not super big on John Brown, but I do see the appeal for this week, definitely. I just think the Cardinals match up really well with the Lions.
All right, let's go. Next game, Falcons-Bears. I think this one will be a lot of fun. I do think that the Falcons will be... I'm afraid of the Falcons this week. Devontae Freeman, you're starting him, and of course, Devontae Freeman, Julio Jones, of course, you're starting them in season long.
Wait a second. You're afraid of the Falcons in what way? Like you're scared that they're going to run up the score on the Bears, or like you're afraid to play them?
I think, yeah, I'm afraid to play them. Yeah, that's right. So I think that, of course, Devontae Freeman and Julio Jones in season long, you play them.
Right.
I think Julio is still going to have a good week. I mean, you can even play him in DFS. I think he's one of the top receivers.
Julio is Julio, dude. He's so good.
But Matt Ryan, not feeling great about him. Tevin Coleman, you know, I'm not feeling great about him either. Like he's going to be touchdown dependent as a backup. He's going to get 10 carries a game. And they're their secondary receivers and tight ends didn't do a whole lot last year, so I don't know what to expect. I don't expect a whole lot. So really, it's just Julio and Devontae out of there, and I don't think Devontae has a good matchup. I think the Bears' defense is better than people think.
I think it's so much better than people think.
And so in DFS, I'm not interested in Devontae Freeman either. I do think that there's some value on the Bears side. What do you say?
I think there's two people specifically, three if you want to go really deep. But I'm also higher on these people than some others. I think Jordan Howard is obviously a good play. This is not to discredit the Falcons. The Falcons front seven. I think they're getting better. I really do. And I think that they're headed in the right direction. I do not want to poo-poo the Falcons because I think that they have a lot of potential this year. But the interior line of the Bears is one of the best in the league. It is an elite interior section of the line. Cody Whitehair, Kyle Long, and Josh Sitton are really, really a great trio, and the way that they run their zone zone stretch, their running game, Jordan Howard is very good at making a single cut and getting a lot of yards and getting upfield very quickly. So I think he's a great play this week, and he's pretty cheap too, if I'm not mistaken. He's 6,300.
Like 6,300.
Yeah, he's 6,300 amongst guys that he's going to get the same or better value and quality of touches that some guys are 2,000 more than him or 1,500 more than him. So I think he's a good play this week. The person who I really think is the best play from the Bears this week is Kendall Wright. He's $3,200. He's near minimum value. That's free. Like as far as DFS is concerned, Kendall Wright is free, and he's going to get 8 targets this week. Like, count it, put it in, take it to the bank. He's getting 8 targets this week, and he's good at catching the football. Kendall Wright is not a scrub. He just got ousted on a Titans team that wound up not really needing his skill set anymore. He didn't fit their offense anymore and it was at a time where they really were going to have to pay him. So they just moved on from him. That's fine. That's whatever. And now that Meredith is down, he plays out of the slot, and Glennon loves the slot guy. He just loves the slot guy, and he loves the tight end. So I think the third guy that you could go for is Miller. I just think there's better options at tight end this week for not too much more money. So Miller would fall out in that case for me, but I don't think he's a bad play this week at all. I can tell you the one person that I really don't want to play is Matt Ryan. Like, the Bears defense is good. Vic Fangio is a premier defensive coordinator in the NFL, and they had a lot of injuries that they dealt with last year that I just can't assume that there's going to be that many injuries to a defense over again. So I think they're going to be better this year. And I'm not saying that the Falcons won't win, but I think that they're going to have more trouble with that defense than some people think that they are. Julio is Julio, but I'm probably really not playing anybody else. So after that game is Raiders Titans. This is the other game that's on the list that you can make a debate for, is like, ooh, I really like both of these offenses, and their defenses are like questionable. What do you think about this game?
Well, I think that the Titans' pass game will be pretty. I think the Titans' offense is like, play them, right? I mean, Mariota's a good DFS pick. I don't know about the receivers individually in DFS because I haven't seen them all play together. I haven't really seen Mariota play with any of them other than Rashard Matthews. So I'm a little bit shy of the receivers just because I want to see how they kind of target them and how they do, how they try to use them all. I think Decker's not a bad play, but again, I'm a little bit shy. I don't think any of them's going to go off for a big game. But I think that collectively they'll have a good game. So I think Mariota's a good play, and of course DeMarco Murray is a good play. I mean, that offensive line is good. The Raiders' defensive line is good at pass rushing, but they're not exceptional at stopping the run. So I play DeMarco Murray. On the Raiders side, Titans secondary is not very good, but their front seven is pretty good. They're very good at stopping the run. They were number 1 against the run last year. So I already don't like Marshawn Lynch this year, and I like him even less in this game in particular. But the Raiders receivers, especially Amari Cooper, let him fly.
Yeah. I think Amari is the guy on the Raiders. It's tough to pick the Raiders wide receivers, man. I did a really good job of it last year. I won some people some money picking the Raiders the Raiders receivers last year because it's usually one that goes off much more so than the other. I think it's an Amari week, personally. I don't love their backfield at all. Like, I think it's almost as likely that one of the backup running backs, because they're pass catchers, gets as many points as Marshawn Lynch does this week. I don't think that's going to be common. I don't think I'm low on Marshawn Lynch, not that low, but I think that this is one of those weeks that's going to be tough sledding for him. Yeah, you're right. The Titans big men in the defensive trenches are good, man. Like they're really good. However, their secondary is yikes. It's not so great. On the Titans side of the ball, I think Delaney is the guy that is going to win this week, strictly because just like we haven't seen Mariota play with the whole conglomerate of wide receivers yet, he hasn't played with them yet. He hasn't played with them all in the same field. It's not just us. Like, you have to go all the way back to minicamp before you can talk about any of these guys even looking at each other's numbers on the same field. So I think the run game is going to tick as usual. I think all of the good receivers, like, that's a pretty good trio of receivers too. Like, Rashard Matthews, Eric Decker, and Corey Davis are nothing to sneeze at. And I think that they're all going to take some time to gel to get on the field together. I wouldn't feel terrible about rolling out Rashard Matthews because he and Mariota obviously have chemistry. I don't think that there's like a forcing effect where it's like not like Mike Evans or anything like that, but like he has great chemistry with Rashard Matthews. He obviously likes the guy, so I wouldn't feel terrible about rolling him out there, but I think Delaney Walker is going to be the winner in this whole thing, at least for this week. So that's probably what I feel best about that game. Let me ask you this. Derrick Henry is stupid priced on DraftKings, in my opinion. He's like $7,000+. Is there any scenario where you would play that guy for $7K?
No.
Okay.
There's no. I wouldn't play him for 4,000.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you just got such a concise answer out of that, because the answer is no. If you were thinking about playing Derrick Henry, the only way that works is you're revolving around a guy that's like getting hurt. That's it. That's your only game plan, is a guy getting hurt. He's not winning the job week 1. He's just not. Like, it's not happening. He's not just going to all of a sudden come in after not having won the job and all of a sudden get a bunch of carries. Please do not play that guy for $7,000. Just don't do it. All right, next game.
Ravens Bengals. Sorry. Ravens Bengals. Yeah. So Joe Flacco's back. He's gonna play. He's out all preseason with a back injury. Bengals don't have any major injuries. They do have a disaster looming at running back. What do you think about this game?
They do have. I think John Ross isn't playing this weekend.
That's right. You're right. John Ross isn't playing.
John Ross is not playing this weekend.
He's in long leagues.
Yeah, sit that guy. He's not going to play this week. You should probably sit him.
Shouldn't play him in DFS anyway this week, but
yeah, the running backs. The running backs are a tough situation. Joe Mixon is obviously the most talented of the group, but the coaching staff obviously wants him to sit back and learn a bit more. I don't think it's terribly impossible that if they're losing this game, you'll see more out of Mixon than we originally were told we'd see out of Mixon. I think because football teams are going to do what they need to do to win, right? Especially when coaches are up against their jobs and stuff like that. They're going to do what they need to do to win. So if they think that, if they're sitting there and they're looking at its third quarter and they're like, shit, we need some points on the board, we should give this young guy the ball that we drafted, they're going to start giving him the ball and potentially let him cut loose. And if he does well, he's going to stay in the game. I'm not banking on that to happen though, right? So I'm not really playing any Bengals in this game. The other thing is that the Ravens are just good. Like, their front seven is just good. Every single year, their front seven just winds up being good. It's also one of the reasons why they're good in special teams every year. They just have a lot of depth. It's the next man up, and they're good. They play well every single year. The Bengals also got worse on the offensive line. I really don't want shit to do with that. Like, I don't want to have to run against that Ravens secondary, and I don't want to have to do it with a crap O-line either. So, and a very mixed backfield. Like, I can't pick anyone out of there where I'm like, oh, this guy could go off. I just don't think it's going to happen. So, you can play AJ Green if you're like really fancy AJ Green. I don't recommend it, especially in DFS. If it's a season long, fire him up. Like, obviously, you do that. On the Ravens side of the ball, I think you're going to see a lot of checkdowns. This is another guy who's like going to get blown up for week 1 is Danny Woodhead. He's probably going to get like huge numbers. I don't know necessarily if he'll have like a massive amount of points, but everybody's going to look at the box score and be like, look at how much they use Danny Woodhead. And it's like, cool your jets on that. Like, I think Flacco's going to go with what he knows, and that's Mike Wallace and Danny Woodhead because they played together in minicamp. That's the last time you have to go back to this team to check out what the offense looked like. Minicamp, right? And I think the people that he was showing preference for was Danny Woodhead and Mike Wallace. And I think that that's probably what you're going to see more of than anything else. None of the tight ends like really make me super excited about this game. I'm not on Jeremy Maclin just because the whole Flacco thing. He could also be injured, so I'm probably not going to play Flacco. I'll play Tucker. If you have to play a kicker, I'll play Tucker in this game. That's it, probably from the Ravens. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, Woodhead's the only guy that I would really think about from the Ravens side. And, you know, Mike Wallace is fine. Like, but DFS, I'm not touching this game.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't touch this game from a DFS standpoint either. FanDuel does play kickers, so if you need a kicker, Justin Tucker's just your guy. Like, he is the guy almost every single week unless you have some magnificently better reason to play someone or he's stupid expensive or something like that. But, you know, Tucker's a good person to play in this game. All right, next game is Eagles-Redskins. Joe, this is the one when you look at the slate, you're like, I like this game. Right? There are things to like about this game. There's 2 offenses that you could make a case for being good, above average to pretty good this year. Both have made strides for the better. Both have gotten healthier. And then defenses that just generally, you know, they don't suck ass, but they're not good. Like they're definitely not inspired. Yeah. Bottom half to bottom third of the league, especially in certain areas of their defense. Right, like Washington run defense is obviously pretty garbage.
You can run all over both of them.
Yeah, you can run all day with them. They don't cover the tight end well at all. They're really bad at covering the tight end. And then on the Eagles side, you could throw to those guys all day. They haven't caught like an interception since Nam. So, what's your takeaway? What's your biggest takeaway from this game? Tell me who you really like.
Well, first thing is I want to be involved in this game, right?
Yeah, whatever, I do too.
Like, if there's any game I want to be involved in, I want to be involved, and I want to be involved on both sides.
Right.
The side I'm more interested in being involved in is the Eagles side, and the reason is I think the Redskins defense is worse than the Eagles defense, and I'm just a little bit worried about Kirk Cousins and Terrell Pryor being on the same page week 1. Mm-hmm. And I think that has to be a big part of that offense. But I do think that Jordan Reed's going to have a good game. Malcolm Jenkins is a good defender who's probably going to be spending a lot of time dealing with Jordan Reed. But I think Cousins is going to do what he knows best in a game that's going to be a divisional game that they need to win. And what he knows best is throwing the ball to Jordan Reed. So I expect Jordan Reed to have a good game. I think that Rob Kelly will be a reasonable – he's very cheap in DFS. And I think
what is he, $4,300? He's $4,300?
$4,300.
Yeah, that's one of the easiest 2x returns in the business, dude. Like 8.6 points out of a guy who's going to get 20 plus touches. Samaj Perine, like you've said, we've talked about this. He's fumbled a bunch in the preseason. They're probably not going to trust him against a big division opponent week 1. And Chris Thompson is probably going to get all the catches, and because Rob Kelly doesn't catch anything, but he's probably not going to get many carries at all, maybe 2, like 3 max. So Rob Kelly, and they're not going to just abandon running the ball. So especially with, I think Kirk Cousins is probably going to start pretty slow as well. I don't know that he and Crowder will probably be on the same page. I don't know how he and Pryor will do. He's probably going to force the ball to Jordan Reed a lot, but you're right. Malcolm Jenkins is a good defender, especially against the tight end. I think that Rob Kelly is an awesome play this week as far as cash games are concerned. And if you have to fire him up in season long as nothing better than a flex or a low end running back 2, like I think he's a good play in those positions.
Mm-hmm. And then on the Eagles side, I want on DFS, I like Carson Wentz. I think the Redskins secondary, aside from Josh Norman, is not great.
Pick me for the Eagles side. Pick me for the Eagles side.
And who's your favorite Eagle, Mike?
Zach Ertz. Stop. Hang on. How is Zach Ertz $3,500 on DraftKings? How? How does it even happen? No, I'm sorry. He's $3,400. Hunter Henry is $3,500. That's who I was thinking of the other one. He's less expensive than any other good tight end out there, and he's like better than most of the tight ends out there. Washington sucks at defending the tight end, okay? And their slot receiver is Nelson Aguilar. Might as well not have a slot receiver. Therefore, their slot receiver is Zach Ertz, and he's already a top guy. And if they run out of 2 tight end sets, Trey Burton will play, and Zach Ertz is still the number 1 look there. Like, Carson Wentz looked much better this preseason. I'm not afraid to roll that dude out, like if I need to, especially in DFS. I think he's a good play this week too. How much is he? Is like 3,500. No. He must be 5,300 is what he is. He's 5,300. I'm pretty sure.
5,300. You're right. Yeah, sorry, I got that.
He's 5,300. So he's a great play. So if you want to pair those two together, like I'm all about it. That's a great volume floor. Like Ertz could see another like 10 target game type of thing. Because I'm telling their backfield conservatively is awful. That's conservatively. They're terrible. They're just terrible. Blunt is trash. Do not play Blunt. In any case, like just don't play him. Sproles is playable because of his skill set if you absolutely need to. I wouldn't play him in any type of cash games or anything like that. There's nobody else in the backfield that's worth a damn. Alshon Jeffrey is a pretty good price this week. He's $5,800 on DraftKings. I don't think he's a bad play by any means. I think he's good value. I don't like Torrey Smith. I know some people have been saying that Torrey Smith is a good play because Alshon Jeffrey is going to be shadowed by Norman. That is a concern, but I don't think he's a good play. I think that your guy is Zach Ertz this week. It's just a no-brainer. I honestly, I'm going to have a hard time not putting Zach Ertz in a lineup because he's just the best available play for the least amount of money. But this game is definitely the one where I'm thinking this could get out of hand points-wise real quick. Right, this could be a 35-38 kind of game when it's all said and done, and 70+ points is something that I want on my fantasy slate. Just remember, don't play the Eagles' backfield, and be careful about which Redskins you play in the passing attack. Just be careful. No, or if you want to play them, that's great, but just understand that they may start slow. That's all. That's the only warning that I have to give you. But I think this is definitely the game to look at the slate. I can tell you one thing. Don't start either of these defenses. Dear God, do not start their defenses. Stray as far away from the defenses as you possibly can. And if you have to start a kicker in this game, Dustin Hopkins is probably the better guy. And I think that they will struggle more in the red zone in this particular game than the Eagles will. So that would be my recommendation. Next one is Colts-Rams. This is another one that just has some interesting storylines along to it, not only on one side of the field with Luck being injured and the lack of information that's come out on him, then the trade for Jacoby Brissett, and also just being able to have some viewing of Scott Tolzien and how that offense is working together. Plus, they got rid of, a solid third receiver. Philip Dorsett was really fast. He obviously had trouble catching the ball. It seems like he made some mental mistakes and stuff like that, but he wasn't useless by any means. And then on the Rams side, Aaron Donald not playing. This just has some very interesting storylines about it. What's your feel from this game, Joe? Like, how do you feel like the game is going to go? Who do you think is going to win? Tell me that.
I think the Rams are going to win.
Yeah, me too. I do too.
I think that they have better coaches on both sides of the ball.
That's fair.
Wade Phillips is their defensive coordinator. And both teams are missing their best player, so who knows what's going to happen. But
they really are. Both teams are missing their best player.
Wade Phillips is a great defensive coordinator, and I think Sean McVay is going to make Jared Goff look competent. I'm not saying that Jared Goff's going to be a top 20 fantasy quarterback this year, but I don't think he's going to look as much of a tire fire as he was last year.
Yikes.
I think he'll be better. I think the Colts defense is atrocious still. I think their offensive line is atrocious still. And now they lost the only thing that was keeping them afloat, which is Andrew Luck. So I don't, with Luck gone, I don't think that I would pick the Colts over almost anybody this year.
Wow. That's
as far as winning a game.
Yeah, I actually think Brissett might be able to keep them out of the absolute dumpster, but I just don't think he's going to play this week. I think he may be able. I think he may be able to keep them out of the dumpster. And if they believe that Luck will come back and try and make a playoff push, that's an acceptable reason to do that. But this week especially, and Vontae Davis is out of this game, by the way. He's also out of this game. So I think that helps a passing attack for the Rams that is. It's going to struggle to start. They may prove me wrong by the end of the year and look anything sort of competent, but I think that they're going to struggle a lot. But Vontae Davis being out to start the season really, really helps. I think Todd Gurley is who I like to fire up in this game more than anyone else. Chudzinski also really likes the tight end. I don't know how good Scott Tolzien is going to be at getting it to Jack Doyle, but just understand that that could be a really good value play, and he could get 6 or 7 targets this game easily. And if they're in the red zone, he's going to be the guy that they target. He just will, unless they're less than 3 yards in, then Frank is going to be the guy. I also think Frank will get good volume this game too, but the Rams defense is really, especially their front 7 is just really good, and Wade Phillips is a very good defensive coordinator, one of the best in the league. So I do think that this will be an interesting look at the Rams. I think we need to pay close attention to this game too, just because there's so many different pieces to this Rams offense and sort of the defense because their new defensive coordinator coming in. I think this is something that we really need to pay attention to. But I do like Gurley. He's $6,000 on DraftKings. I really like firing him up. I think he's a 20-touch minimum, and I think that he can just eviscerate the Colts D. Like, I think this is a really good game for him to start a new, turn over a new leaf, so to speak, for this year. I think this is a good one. I'm firing up Gurley like all over. I think he's a great value play. Yeah, I think that's probably the only ones that I'm firing up from that game is really Gurley, maybe Jack Doyle. That's probably it.
Yeah, not crazy about the fantasy prospects of that game. 2 bad quarterbacks is not what you highlight.
Not what you highlight.
So next game, Panthers-Niners. This one's interesting for a lot of reasons. One reason I'm excited about it is finally, supposedly.
What do you get to see, Joe? What do you get to see, Joe?
Been waiting all preseason for this.
God damn,
I don't love Cam as a player,
preseason.
but I want to see what he looks like in this offense because he is the thing that makes it go. And so I want to see if this offense is going to be fantasy viable or not, right? So they're revamping it. We're going to get to see what it looks like. So that should be really exciting. On the Niners side, I'm excited for them too because Mike and I both have been talking up Kyle Shanahan's offensive genius and in some ways predictability from a fantasy perspective as both fantastic things for the 49ers. So this is a big game for us. One to watch. Can the Niners look as good as they did in that third preseason game against the Vikings? And how does Cam look, and how does this Carolina offense look? This revamped Carolina offense look. So what I suspect is Cam still being not 100% back. I think Carolina's going to run the ball a lot. So I think both of those running backs are playable this week.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the Niners' run defense isn't bad. But I think that Cam won't run it at all, basically, with his shoulder. I think, or they want to design runs for him with his shoulder. So I think Stewart will get the goal line carries, and I think they're going to run the heck out of the ball. I don't really want any part of the Panthers receivers until I see see if Cam can throw it and what they do with this new offense. What do you think?
I think this is going to be an interesting game for a couple of different reasons, and I think that the 49ers defense is going to surprise a lot of people. I think that they're more talented than they were given credit for in the past, and they got a little bit better in the offseason this year with Solomon Thomas and Reuben Foster. Both good first rounders. They're both solid. That gives them 4 first rounders on their defensive line, and they were eating the Vikings up. Now, the Vikings have the worst line in football. Okay, so I'm not trying to sit here and say that they're like world beaters, but they looked good. They looked well. They looked great on. They looked great at stopping the run. They looked great at getting after the pass or doing the pass rush as well. And their linebackers were filling gaps just wonderfully. So I think that they have a lot of talent on this 49er defense, and I also think that the getting Luke Kuechly back, as we were speaking about earlier, is a really. I mean, the front 7 for the Panthers has been good perennially. Every single year, it's been good as well. I think you can kill their secondary, but I think everybody else on that defense is really good. So I think this game is just going to be so interesting. I'm not confident that Cam is going to throw a whole lot in this game, the same kind of like you are. I really am. Like, I'm sitting Kelvin Benjamin in season-long leagues. That's how concerned I am about his health in general. I do not think you'll see any design runs. I do not want to play Cam this week. I do think that both fantasy running backs are viable. I think that Stewart's going to start the year hotter, and then it's going to transition more into McCaffrey. I do think he's a really good player. I just don't know how it's going to work out with him and Cam. So I do want to see how that offense runs as well. I don't think we're going to get to see it this week, though, Joe. Like I think it's going to be one more week of waiting before we see what this offense is really going to operate like. And then as far as the 49ers are concerned, I think Carlos Hyde just has so much upside, and especially at a $4,600 price in DFS, like he has so much potential upside. He could return 3-4x value if the game really goes their way. And I just think Garcon is such a great play because the X receiver can't be stopped, dude. And then like their secondary really struggles. And then the other thing is if you're firing up a tournament play this week, Marquise Goodwin is not a bad person to throw in there. The dude has legit Olympic sprinter speed, and the defense for the Panthers is going to be concentrated on stopping the run, stopping the throws over the middle to the running back, and then stopping the slot receiver from really trying to get going. So I don't think that it's and Hoyer throws a fine deep ball. Like you can fire up Hoyer this week too if you really need to. If you really need a stopgap, he's not a bad play this week either. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that one goes. I don't think there's a lot of rushing yards, but I do think that there's a lot of dump off yards to the running back. So I think it's just a very interesting game. I think I'll be keeping an eye on that one too. What's next?
The last Sunday afternoon game, Seahawks-Packers. This one should be a lot of fun. Both of these teams traditionally start slow, but one of them has to win the game, I think.
They can still tie, can't they?
They could tie 0-0 maybe, but not with the Packers defense. So this is a really interesting matchup from a fantasy perspective because you've got the Seahawks, which are a fantastic defense, maybe the best in football, not from a fantasy perspective, from an actual perspective.
From a real perspective, they may be.
And the Packers have one of the best, if not the best, offenses in football. So a lot of people drafted Packers high. My recommendation is going to be knock them all down a tier because the Seahawks defense is that good. So in DFS, I'm not really playing any Packers this week because they're going to be priced like they were drafted, and they're not worth that this week. On the Seahawks side, the Packers defense at least last year, was atrocious, and we don't really have much reason to believe they've gotten much better. So I'm not terrified of the Seahawks as far as Russell Wilson, Jimmy Graham, and Doug Baldwin go. I want to avoid the Seahawks running back situation like the plague.
Jesus, it's so bad. It's just terrible. Like I honestly think I'm upping my prediction. I've told people to get a hold of Chris Carson and stash him. I honestly think that as early as this week, you could see him just outplay the other running backs. It's very possible. Eddie Lacy's listed as third on the depth chart. Thomas Rawls is listed as first. He's got a high ankle sprain. He lives with a high ankle sprain. I'm pretty sure he may not get that many carries in the game. CJ Prosise is supposedly 100% healthy. One hit and he's to the graveyard. And then I just think that Carson is better than Eddie Lacy in general, and obviously they don't have all that much faith in him if they have him buried on the depth chart. So I don't want anything to do with that backfield at all. I do think firing up Doug Baldwin is okay, but I think you need to know that it's just as likely that he gets like one catch for 15 yards as he does like 8 catches and 3 touchdowns. You just need to know that it's that these teams start slow. Oh no. Can you hear me? Hang tight. There you go.
Back.
All right, cool. I just think that it's either or is just as likely, right? The Doug Baldwin train can go either way, and with both of these teams starting so slow, you just never know what it's going to be. Russell Wilson's not a terrible play, especially with the scrambling ability. You can get some easy rushing yards and stuff like that against this porous Green Bay defense. Jimmy Graham is definitely the person that I would say if they wind up getting into the red zone, you could see 2 touchdowns out of Jimmy. So I don't think he's a terrible play either. I'm not starting anybody on the Packers side. Guys, this is something that you have to understand. The Seahawks get beat usually, if they get beat at all, by the short, fast receiver. That's like it. That's the only thing that they get beat by, and the Packers don't really have one of those guys. Like they just don't have that guy that will really line up and just beat them with short explosiveness, crisp route running. They just won't. They don't have. I'm not saying they don't have any good route runners, but like they don't have anybody on their roster that will just eviscerate the Seahawks. And that pass rush is just nasty now. So I'm interested to see how they're going to hold up. This is just not really a game that I want to hold ton of. Both of these teams will be very interesting to play later on in the year. This is just one of those matchups where it's like, oh, they're each playing each other. Crap. It's not really a good game to play for DFS. So be careful playing those guys. The next game is the Sunday night game, I believe. That's the Giants-Cowboys. This one's obviously interesting because we get the Zeke ruling yesterday, very late. And Zeke is going to play week 1, but his suspension is still upheld. And Joe, I don't know about you, but I'm worried about what this suspension and the restraining order and all this kind of injunction stuff could go as far as pushing his suspension potentially later on in the year and then crippling him for the playoffs. I really don't want that to happen at all. I would rather him just, if he's going to serve it, I want him to serve it earlier to try and have him back for the late buys. But seeing as he's going to play this week, you obviously fire Zeke up in season-long leagues. You're going to fire Dak up in season-long leagues, Dez, all those guys. On the Giants side of the ball, OBJ still hasn't practiced, and unless he gets me a really, really good practice by Friday, like a full practice, and he's not limping around and they're just saying it's full, I'm probably not going to play him this weekend because I think he'll be nothing better than a decoy, and I think that Marshall and Shepard are completely capable of handling the load if he's not there. So what's kind of your take on this game, and what do you think? It's going to be an interesting game. It's a big division game, and with Zeke not being suspended, I think it's going to be very interesting. What's your take?
I mean, my number one guy in this game is probably Brandon Marshall, to be honest. I think that with Odell Beckham's injury, I think that like, as you mentioned, I think he's going to be on a snap count. I think if he plays at all, he'll be on a snap count, and he'll be used mostly as a decoy. I don't think they want him cutting and getting tackled on that ankle too much. They got a whole season to go. I think the Giants' defense is really good.
I think they're so good.
I think they're really good. They shut down Zeke the first game last year. The second game, he did a little bit. He had 100 yards and a touchdown, but at that time he was doing more than that in most games. So in the Dallas offensive line is significant. They're still very good. They're significantly worse this year than they were last year. Mm-hmm. They lost 2 starters, right? I mean, they're not as good. They're still probably second or third or fourth best line in football, but they're not going to blow people 5 yards off the ball.
I think they're top 5.
They're not going to blow people 5 yards off the ball anymore. But yeah, the Giants defense is really good. I'm a little bit. I'm not like. Of course, in season long, you're not sitting Dak or Dez, but I'm not playing them at all in DFS. I'm not touching any of the Cowboys in DFS. Giants defense is too good. And Brandon Marshall, for me, then, is the last man standing, right? Not touching the Giants running game. You got to be kidding. So Brandon Marshall is the last man standing. He's the one I want. Giants are going to throw the ball a lot, and Marshall's your guy.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna go a slight different path here. Janoris Jenkins has shut down Dez the past like 3 times they played, I think, something like that. I would actually, like, if I had a legit other option, I would consider sitting Dez this week and playing somebody like Cole Beasley in favor of him, because I don't think the Giants have as good of an answer for that kind of guy. Like, okay, let's refresh. You play your studs. I'm not sitting Dez Bryant for Cole Beasley. I'm just saying, like, if I have other good options, I would consider sitting Dez. And then, pause. If Cole Beasley is available, I think he's the best Dallas Cowboy to play. And then on the other side of the ball, I think that Sterling Shepard might be the guy that's a little bit more attractive to me, strictly because he plays out of the slot, and I think that Brandon Marshall is going to be covered a little bit more heavily than Sterling Shepard will. But the Dallas defense kind of blows, to be honest. Like they're rough. I don't know how good it's going to be. I'm interested to see what their defense looks like this year. I think they're middle of the pack at best. And so I think that Sterling is probably a pretty good play this week. I don't really trust Eli Manning all that much. Actually, it's not Eli Manning I don't trust. I don't trust McAdoo, right? I don't trust McAdoo at all. He always runs when he should throw and throws when he should run. He finds a way to muck it up. And so I'm not touching any of the Giants' backfield. Those guys rush for 400 yards max season wide. So I don't want any of those dudes. I think Sterling is probably the way to go. If you need to play Eli in dire straits, I'm okay with it. Or if he fits your budget, I don't think he'll do terrible for you, but I don't think you should expect anything super great out of him. So just be careful of the Dez Bryant play. I definitely wouldn't play him in DFS this week at all. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be terribly concerned with playing Zeke this week. Like if you want to play him, it's fine. I just wouldn't like be super high on him to play him in DFS this week. If he's your guy, whatever, that's cool. But I think that there's other better options available for the same amount of money, you know. So the next game, we go on a Monday night. We have a doubleheader. The first one is Saints-Vikings. Snead is out of this game because he is suspended for the first 3 games. So no injuries there, but he is suspended. So, Joe, I think that presents an interesting problem for the Saints because it moves them into a spot in their receiving core where they really don't want to be, right? I think this offense operates wonderfully with their top 3 guys and then having to play their pass catching tight end and their 4th receiver in wide sets as little as possible, right? I think this is going to force them into playing both of those in various points of the game where they really don't want to be. And the Vikings have one of the most adaptable, strong defenses in the entire league. So how is this going to play itself out? Like what's the play here?
Well, for me, I think that the Saints are going to do a lot of 2 tight end sets in this game. I think that their second tight end is Josh Hill or Human, are both better than whoever their 3rd receiver is, Brandon Coleman or Tommy Lee Lewis. You don't want any part of those guys. So I think that Ted Ginn picks up a lot of value with Willie Snead out, just because Drew's still going to throw the ball 30 times, and he's got to throw somebody. Can't be Mike Thomas every time.
Right.
And I think they're going to try to run the ball a lot. They have 3 really good running backs now, and so I think that the 2 tight end set makes a lot of sense for them. I think this is a hard game for the Saints. I think that I think the Vikings defense is really good.
Yeah, I
and
agree.
The Saints are going to be starting a rookie left tackle against a really good defensive line. So again, 2 tight end sets make a lot of sense from that perspective too, to give that guy some extra help. So I expect the Saints to play it pretty conservative here.
Yeah, I putting a rookie left tackle up against either he's going to get Danielle Hunter or Everson Griffin. I don't think either of those are a recipe for success, personally. I think he's a good left tackle. I think he's a talented kid, but like I said, against a really good defense and 2 very talented pass rushers with a defensive genius in Mike Zimmer, as far as I'm concerned. And I think it's I don't know about a recipe for disaster, but I think they're going to really have to bring their A game to be in this game and pull off a win on Monday night on the road. And Breeze is usually worse on the road. It isn't a dome, so that's better. He's usually fine in a dome on the road. So that's okay. They do have 3 good running backs. I wonder how well they're going to be able to produce holes against this defense. I think if the Saints could produce some good run blocking against this defense, they can pull out this game, and they won't have to go 4 wide, have their tight end run the seam as often as they usually do, and they can't afford to run out of 2 tight end sets and hopefully keep Fleener off the field, because I think Fleener really, really hurts them this game. But I don't think it's impossible for Michael Thomas to get fed this game, but I just think the Vikings are going to be able to adapt to that. So I wouldn't like roll out Mike Thomas with any sort of like real DFS bravado, so to speak. However, I do think that he's an interesting tournament potential play because nobody should really be on him, and he could get fed just like usual. So I do think that's an easy or an interesting play. The other interesting play here, and I'm not necessarily saying roll him out in DFS, but I think it's just something to keep an eye on, is you could see Kamara play in the spot instead of Willie Snead if they feel like their other options aren't working out for him, because he's played this sort of role before, and it fits that joker role that they call in their offense that people like Darren Sproles and Reggie Bush have played in the past. So I don't think that it's something that's out of the realm of possibility. So keep an eye on Kamara this week. Once again, this is another one. If you see the box score and he blew up, week 3, that's all going by the wayside again. So don't expect that to stay keeping to continue. But I think an interesting play for me on this one is Stephon Diggs. For me, is a pretty good play in this one because he's moving to the outside this year. They're moving Adam Thielen to the inside to play the slot. I think PJ Williams will actually be pretty good at guarding the slot against Adam Thielen. I think he'll be okay there. I think Rudolph could tear him up if he's not any more injured than he leads on. And I also think that Stephon Diggs, whoever's on the outside for the Vikings gets a free touchdown, right? So whatever you were expecting that guy to do, you can add a free touchdown to it, and it'll probably be a long touchdown to it. You know what I'm saying? So I think that you can add that and expect some sort of pretty solid value out of that. What do you think about the Vikings run game in this one? Because I'm not particularly high on it. It's not a Dalvin Cook problem. It's more of I think the Saints are going to be a little bit better on defense run-wise than they were last year. What do you think about it?
I like Dalvin Cook in this game,
okay.
And there are two reasons why I like Dalvin Cook in this game. One of them is that while they're better than they did last year, this unit was a disaster last year. Yeah. And if your running back caught the ball out of the backfield, he was getting 10 yards every time. Mm-hmm. And Dalvin Cook is going to be the guy on third downs there too, I think. And so I think that even if he doesn't get a ton of rush yards against an improved Saints defensive line and not so improved Vikings offensive line, I think that his ability to catch Cook's ability to catch the ball out of the backfield combined with the Saints improving but maybe still not great linebacking core gives him some pretty good upside for getting a lot of receptions and a lot of yards. I love, for the same reasons, I love Rudolph.
Right. Yeah. No. I think all those things are fair. I think. I don't know. We're split on this one. Definitely the whole, should you start Dalvin Cook against the Saints thing. I can't fault you if you go for it. I'm not in love with it. I would say proceed with caution as far as I'm concerned. But how much is Dalvin Cook this week? He's $5,900. See, he's one of the more expensive type of. He's in the top.
You can get Gurley for $100 more, and Gurley's worth the 100 more.
Right. So that's maybe my my hesitation with it more than anything else is that you can get guys a little bit more expensive that are totally worth it, and maybe even some guys that should get the same production versus worse defensive run fronts specifically. But you're right. The dump off upside, which Sam Bradford absolutely loves, like that dude gets his rocks off to dumping off to running backs and tight ends. The dump off upside to Dalvin Cook is very high here, so don't be surprised if he could take a couple of 30-yarders to the house, and like nothing against that crappy linebacking core. So okay, good deal. I like it. The last game is the Chargers-Broncos. The important injury note here is that Demaryius Thomas practiced in full today, and so he should be – I expect him to be fully removed from this injury list come game time on Monday. Now, be careful. Something could always get re-aggravated. Don't get caught with your pants down on a Monday night, the last game of the week. So be careful in that one. I would say if he practices all the way through Friday and through Saturday, you should be good to go. But, Joe, what do you think about this game? This is another big division game. It's Monday night. It's a tough game for the Chargers receivers to start and Phillip Rivers to start. I don't want anything to do with any of their receivers. But we have seen in the past that running backs and especially pass-catching running backs, which Melvin Gordon is not really known for, but he can do. Pass-catching running backs and running backs in general and tight ends can kind of tear the Broncos up or give them fits at least. What do you think is going to be the overall, when it's all said and done, what do you think this game is going to look like?
It's going to be low scoring. If the scoring numbers get high, it's because there were defensive touchdowns. Both of these teams are turnover prone.
Yeah.
So fire up both of the defenses in your season long leagues. But I'm not crazy about either of the offenses in this game. I think the Chargers are going to have a very good offense this year. I think that they don't match up especially well with the Broncos.
Yeah.
I do think that Melvin Gordon should be good to go. The Broncos you could run all over him last year. And again, Melvin will probably be in there on at least half of the third downs. So, that's fine. I'm staying away from Phil. He's too turnover prone against the secondary. Broncos receivers, you can play them, but the Chargers secondary will be pretty good. Trevor Siemian, we all feel pretty okay about him. He's good enough to not cripple the Broncos receivers, but he does put a ceiling on them. And that ceiling's 14 fantasy points or 16 fantasy points. Yeah. 100 yards and a touchdown.
Demaryius Thomas gets Verrett this week, and so I'm much more willing to fire up Emmanuel Sanders this week if I have to play either one of them. So I'm willing to play Emmanuel Sanders this week if you want to play him even in DFS. He could be a sneaky good play. Emmanuel Sanders is a guy that just gives 150% on every goddamn play, dude. Like, ball could be 20 feet away from him, he's diving for it and he wants to get it. So that guy in a game like this where it's a tough division game and like one play really could be the difference between winning and losing, he could be the guy that scores the 40-yard touchdown when he shouldn't have, right? So he could be a very interesting play this week. I don't want anything to do with the Denver running game. I don't want anything to do with the Chargers passing game. I'm fine with playing Melvin Gordon. He's not cheap this week, but for a guy that gets that many attempts and that many attempts around the red zone, if they get there, $6,600 isn't too bad, and you can run all over the Broncos if you do it correctly. Their line is suspect, but he can run all over them. Really, the play that I'm looking for this week is the Chargers defense because they're cheap on DFS and they were already pretty damn good last year and they played well against the Broncos. And then the other sneaky play is Hunter Henry because he just matches up well against the Broncos. He just plays well against them. But the other thing, this is like we were saying earlier, you get Ertz for $100 cheaper. Like, I just don't see how you can fire up Henry over Ertz unless you just strictly want to be contrarian. So keep that in your back pocket as far as a contrarian play, but I would just fire up Ertz with more confidence. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. That's all of the games for this week. Joe, do you have anything else that you want to add? Do we want to go over any type of matchup things for week 1? I think somebody had a stardom sit-em question. Let me go look for that while you're doing whatever you were going to do.
Sure. The last thing I want to add to the Broncos-Chargers game is everybody's really high. Almost everybody's pretty high on Hunter Henry this year. And one thing we really need to see out of him and out of the Chargers is how much does he play more or less than Antonio Gates. And in particular, how much, like, we want to see what happens in the red zone, right? Tight ends make their living in the red zone. If they get into the red zone and all of a sudden Hunter Henry comes out and Antonio Gates comes in, and we need to start worrying about season long. So you need to watch this game to see that. Or, we'll tell you about it next week. But this is something you have to watch and see. You can't just look at the stat line.
Yeah, 100%. I think that Antonio Gates is going to catch one touchdown and then not necessarily like just go by the wayside, but I think he's going to be much more of a role player than the actual. Like, I really do think that they're trying to get him the touchdown record.
Yeah.
And then
Most touchdowns ever.
Yeah, I really think they're just trying to get him the record, and then they're going to let him kind of just chill out a bit. And I do think Hunter Henry is a really talented player, but you're right, we do need to watch how this snap count goes, where they're getting their snaps, how many routes they're running, how many passing plays that they're in on. I think these are all very important metrics to keep up with, which we will as we're watching the games moving forward. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good point to bring up. He was pretty cheap on DFS this week, and just the way that they match up with the Broncos, I thought that he's a viable play, especially if you're trying to go.
Oh yeah,
so it's interesting.
I totally agree. I just moving forward, you got to keep an eye on him, just to note, for future reference.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
This week, I think it's a good bet. If you don't feel like going Ertz for some reason, but just in general, in both season long and DFS, it's important to pay attention to the playing time split between those two.
Yeah,
just because we think they should play Hunter Henry more doesn't mean that they will.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And some of it is just who does Phil like, and Phil obviously likes Antonio a lot. It's not that he doesn't like Hunter Henry. We just know that he likes Antonio Gates a lot. So, okay, I think that wraps it up for us for this week. We went over a lot of DFS. We went through each game. We probably won't do that every week, guys, but for week 1, we're just so excited. We wanted to give you as much possible blanket of knowledge as we could for each game, what we were really thinking about each one. We'll probably do some more crafting of lineups next week. Actually, Joe, I think you made a cash game lineup that I really liked. Do you have that one pulled up and we can give them an example of a cash game lineup, and then we'll kind of sign off and tell everybody what we're doing next week. This is for a game where you're looking for high volume floor, you're not looking to get in the top 10% of people. You're just looking to be slightly better than average. Joe, give me each position, how you broke them down.
Sure. So this is, you pick 3 wide receivers, 1 flex, 2 running backs, and then a quarterback, tight end, defense. So my quarterback was Carson Wentz at 5,300. So I thought that was a really solid deal for a quarterback who's going against a bad defense and really improved his offensive weapons. We've got Carlos Hyde and Todd Gurley at running back and Jordan Howard in the flex. And at receiver, we've got Julio Jones, Doug Baldwin, Larry Fitzgerald, Zach Ertz at tight end, and the Rams against the Colts on defense. So I think that
I mean, good.
I think that having those three running backs, Hyde, Gurley, and Howard, are all really high floor and reasonably high ceiling guys. I think Julio Jones is Julio Jones. Um, and Doug Baldwin playing against the Packers and Larry Fitzgerald playing against Detroit. I love those matchups. So I feel really good about the floor on this team.
Yeah, I think the floor is really great, and I was actually the other thing that I was going to comment on before you kind of said it is that this has sneaky upside too. Like this has very interesting upside, so it's almost a sort of an interesting cash game play where it could be one of the very high scoring teams in the league. In whatever league that you're playing, tournament setup or cash game setup. So I think it's a very interesting play. But I think that's a great way to break down the construction of your cash game lineup. You're just looking for that high floor. None of those guys are going to bagel. They're all in systems and games that we think should go positively for their game flow. So that's to give you guys an idea of how one would go. We'll do more of those and actually show you the lineups that we're probably going to roll with in probably next week in the future. But we wanted to cover some of the DFS basics for this week to make sure that everybody knows how to play, which lineups you're really trying to get into, and that will allow us to open the doors for greater things, some more advanced things in the future weeks. So that's all that we got for this week. We'll come to you guys next week. Guys, enjoy football. I'm so excited. I cannot wait. I'm just going to not be able to sleep tonight, but another great week for us. Joe, you got anything to say before we sign off?
Football's here. Let's do it. Stay classy.
All right. See you guys later. Peace.